After 10 years in prison for a crime he never committed, 68-year-old Taiwo Adeyemi returned to his old house in Lagos with nothing but a worn bag and a rusted key. But when the door opened, a terrified young woman stood inside with a little boy hiding behind her. "This is my home," Taiwo said, his voice trembling. The woman's eyes filled with tears. She handed him a letter bearing the signature of Morenike, his wife, who had died while he was imprisoned. "Your wife told me you would return," she whispered. "She also knew who framed you. Before we uncover the truth, tell us which country you're watching from and your local time, and subscribe so you don't miss Taiwo's journey toward justice." The steel gate of Kirikiri Correctional Center opened shortly after 7 on a humid Monday morning. Taiwo Adeyemi stood beneath the fading sign outside the entrance, holding a small brown bag against his chest. Inside were 2 shirts, a pair of trousers, a wooden comb, several letters, and the old brass key he had protected for 10 years. Everything he owned could now fit beneath one arm. Behind him, the gate closed with a heavy metallic sound. Taiwo flinched. For a moment he could not move. During his years in prison, he had imagined this day so often that freedom had begun to feel like a place invented by desperate men. He had pictured Morenike waiting across the road in her blue church dress, smiling through tears and calling his name. Sometimes he imagined his younger brother, Yetunde, standing beside her. In his most hopeful dreams, neighbors came carrying food, music, and apologies. But no one was waiting. Cars passed through the morning traffic. A bus conductor shouted for passengers. 2 women selling bottled water barely looked in Taiwo's direction. Lagos continued around him, without pausing to acknowledge that a man had just recovered a life the law had taken away. A prison welfare officer named Chukwuma had given him a little money before his release. "It will take you home," Chukwuma had said. Taiwo had almost asked what home meant after 10 years, but he kept the question inside. He began walking toward the bus stop. His steps were slow, not because his legs were weak, but because every open space made him uneasy. In prison, walls had always told him where to stop. Now the road seemed too wide, the sky too high, and the crowds too unpredictable. At the bus stop, several passengers complained when Taiwo took too long to count his money. The fares had changed. The buses looked different. Nearly everyone held a smartphone, their fingers moving across glowing screens with an ease that made him feel as if he had awakened in another century. When a yellow bus finally arrived, Taiwo climbed inside and sat near the window. Lagos unfolded before him. New buildings rose where old shops had once stood. Flyovers crossed neighborhoods he remembered as open roads. Bright advertisements covered walls that had once carried election posters. Young men wearing headphones moved through traffic, while motorcycle riders slipped between vehicles with reckless confidence. Taiwo watched everything with silent astonishment. 10 years earlier, he had been 58, broad-shouldered and respected. He had owned a construction supply business with his partner, Femi Balogun. He had employed 23 workers. He had been the man relatives called when school fees were due or hospital bills arrived. Then a warehouse burned. A night guard died. Records were produced showing that Taiwo had ordered dangerous chemicals to be stored illegally. A witness claimed to have seen his car near the warehouse. Money appeared in an account connected to him. Every piece of evidence had seemed to point in the same direction. Taiwo had denied everything. The court had not believed him. He turned away from the window when the memories became too sharp. Across from him, a mother broke a piece of bread and shared it between 2 children. The younger child laughed when crumbs fell onto his shirt. Taiwo remembered how Morenike used to laugh at small things, the whistle of a boiling kettle, a stubborn goat blocking the road, the way he always misplaced his reading glasses while wearing them on his head. The laughter inside the bus faded behind the ache in his chest. Morenike had visited him every month during his first 3 years. She would sit across the glass partition, press her palm against it, and tell him that she was searching for the truth. "I know the man I married," she always said. "One day you will walk home with your name restored." During the 4th year, her visits became less frequent. She said she was tired, but refused to explain why. Then, one afternoon, Yetunde came instead. Morenike had collapsed at a market. Cancer had already spread through her body. Taiwo requested permission to visit the hospital, but the application was delayed. By the time approval came, his wife had been buried for 11 days. He did not cry when Yetunde told him. He simply sat down on the concrete floor of his cell and stared at the wall until morning. Grief became another sentence, one no judge had announced, and no calendar could shorten. After Morenike's death, Yetunde visited twice. Then he stopped coming. His phone number eventually ceased working, and Taiwo's letters were returned unopened. Whether his brother had moved, died, or deliberately abandoned him, Taiwo did not know. Now, as the bus carried him deeper into Lagos, Taiwo felt the terrible weight of being free in a city where no one might remember him kindly. He changed buses twice. At the final stop, he walked toward the neighborhood where he and Morenike had bought their house after 27 years of marriage. The streets were narrower than he remembered. Small grocery shops had become pharmacies and mobile money kiosks. A concrete drainage channel ran beside the road. Children in neat uniforms hurried towards school, watched by parents who appeared too young to remember the trial that had made Taiwo's name infamous. An elderly fruit seller looked at him for several seconds. "Taiwo?" she asked uncertainly. He recognized Mama Bisola, though time had bent her shoulders and whitened her hair. "It is me," he replied. The warmth vanished from her face. Her eyes moved toward the ground. "We heard you were being released." Taiwo waited for her to say more, but she began arranging oranges that were already perfectly arranged. "Is my brother still here?" he asked. Mama Bisola hesitated. "Yetunde left years ago. Some say he went to Ibadan." "Did he leave an address?" She shook her head. "And my house?" Her hands stopped moving. "You should go and see for yourself." Taiwo sensed fear beneath her words. Before he could question her, a customer approached, and Mama Bisola turned away with visible relief. He continued down the road. Every step brought back a memory. Morenike bargaining with a fish seller. Yetunde repairing a broken bicycle near the gate. Taiwo returning from work to find neighbors watching football through the sitting room window because his television had the clearest picture. Then he saw the house. Its cream-colored walls had faded and rust marked the edges of the corrugated roof. The mango tree Taiwo planted years earlier had grown large enough to shade half the courtyard. Someone had repaired the front gate with mismatched metal sheets, but the number beside it remained the same. 17. Taiwo stopped across the road. His hand entered his pocket and closed around the brass key. For 10 years he had imagined placing it into that lock. He had believed the house would be empty and silent, preserved like a room inside his memory. But a child's red sandal rested near the front step. Freshly washed clothes moved on a line in the courtyard. Then Taiwo noticed a thin trail of smoke rising from the kitchen chimney. Someone was living in his home. Taiwo remained across the road for several minutes staring at the smoke above his kitchen. Perhaps Yetunde had returned. Perhaps a relative had taken responsibility for the property. Yet the child's sandal near the step and the unfamiliar dresses on the clothesline made those explanations feel unlikely. He crossed the road and pushed open the repaired gate. The hinges gave a sharp squeal. Somewhere inside the house, a metal spoon fell against a pot. Taiwo stepped into the courtyard, breathing in the familiar scent of damp earth beneath the mango tree. The old wooden bench Morenike loved was gone. In its place stood a small sewing table covered with folded fabric. A woman appeared in the kitchen doorway. She was in her early 30s, slim with tired eyes and neat braids gathered behind her head. She held a cooking spoon in one hand. A flour-stained apron covered her simple green dress. When she saw Taiwo, she froze. "Who are you?" she asked. Taiwo's fingers tightened around his bag. "I was about to ask you the same question." The woman glanced toward the open gate, as if judging whether she could reach it before him. "You cannot enter people's homes without permission." People's homes. Taiwo pulled the brass key from his pocket and held it up. "I bought this house. I painted these walls. I planted that mango tree with my own hands." The woman's face changed. Fear gave way to recognition, then disbelief. Taiwo Adeyemi. Hearing his full name from a stranger unsettled him. "How do you know me?" Before she could answer, a little boy emerged from the hallway. He wore a faded school uniform shirt and held a toy car missing one wheel. When he saw Taiwo, he hurried behind the woman and wrapped both arms around her waist. "Mummy, who is he? Go to the bedroom." "Toby," the boy remained where he was. "Now, please." Something in her voice persuaded him. He retreated into the hallway, but continued watching through the half-open bedroom door. The woman placed the spoon on the sewing table. "My name is Yetunde Akinola," she said. "I live here with my son. You are living in my house. I was given permission." "By whom?" She hesitated. "By your wife." Taiwo felt the courtyard tilt beneath him. "My wife is dead." "I know." The calmness of her answer awakened a sudden anger inside him. For 10 years, strangers had discussed Morenike as if her life were evidence to be examined. Prison officials had spoken of her death as an administrative fact. Now this woman stood inside Morenike's home and claimed a connection to her. "You knew my wife, yes. How she helped me when I had nowhere else to go." Taiwo studied her clothes, the sewing machine, and the carefully patched curtain inside the kitchen window. Nothing suggested wealth. Still, desperation did not make her story true. "When did she give you permission to live here 3 years ago?" "Morenike died 6 years ago." "I know that too." "Then who allowed you to remain after her death?" "She did. She prepared documents before she passed away." Taiwo gave a bitter laugh. "You expect me to believe my wife gave our house to a stranger without telling me? She did not give it to me. You have occupied it for 3 years. I have protected it." Taiwo looked at the rusted roof-repaired gate and clothes hanging where Morenike once dried his work shirts. Protected it from whom? Yetunde opened her mouth, but no answer came. Taiwo stepped toward the front door. She moved quickly and blocked him. "What are you hiding? Nothing. Then move." This conversation should happen calmly. I have spent 10 years being told to remain calm while other people took pieces of my life. His voice rose. Toby began crying behind the bedroom door. Yetunde's expression hardened. "Do not frighten my son. And what about me? Should I not be frightened to return from prison and find strangers living in my home?" The word prison seemed to settle heavily between them. Yetunde looked at him differently, not with disgust, as many others had, but with a pain he did not understand. She stepped aside. Taiwo entered the sitting room. The furniture was not his. A worn brown sofa stood against one wall. Fabric thread and half-finished dresses filled a wooden shelf. Yet pieces of his former life remained: the family clock above the doorway, Morenike's framed Bible verse, and the white lace cloth she had placed over the center table every Sunday. His wedding photograph was gone. "Where is my wife's picture?" Yetunde pointed toward a cabinet. "I kept it safe." The frame broke during the rainy season when water entered through the roof. Taiwo opened the cabinet. Inside lay several photographs wrapped carefully in cloth. He found Morenike smiling on their wedding day, her hand resting against his chest. His anger weakened for one dangerous moment. "You repaired the roof," he asked, "as much as I could afford." "With whose money?" "My sewing work. I also paid the property charges." "Why?" "Because your wife asked me to keep the house from being seized." Seized by whom? Again Yetunde avoided his eyes. Taiwo replaced the photographs. You will take your belongings and leave. Her head lifted. Where should my son and I go? That is not my responsibility. She said you would listen. My wife is not here to confirm anything you say. Yetunde flinched, but Taiwo continued. I do not know you. I do not know what documents you have created, or what story you told the neighbors. This house belongs to me. It still belongs to you. Then leave it. Toby came running from the hallway and stood beside his mother. Please don't send us away, he said. We don't have another house. Taiwo looked at the boy's thin arms and frightened face. Compassion stirred within him, but suspicion crushed it quickly. He had once trusted people. That trust had helped put him behind bars. You have until tomorrow evening, he said. Yetunde's eyes filled with tears. Morenike said, you were a good man. You did not know the man I was. She told me what happened to you. Taiwo turned sharply. What did she tell you, that you were innocent? He searched Yetunde's face for mockery and found none. Morenike spent her last years trying to prove it. She continued. Even when she became ill, she would not stop asking questions. Taiwo's throat tightened. What questions? Yetunde glanced at Toby. Go and put your books in your school bag. This time the boy obeyed. When he was gone, she lowered her voice. Your wife believed the warehouse fire was arranged. She believed someone altered the company records and paid the witness who testified against you. Taiwo felt the old courtroom closing around him again. Who told you this? Morenike did. Why would she trust you? Yetunde's fear returned. She pressed her hands together and looked toward the cabinet. There are things I cannot explain without showing you what she left. She entered the bedroom before Taiwo could stop her. He heard a drawer open, followed by the sound of a box being moved. When she returned, she carried a cream-colored envelope sealed with faded tape. Taiwo recognized the handwriting immediately. His name was written across the front in the careful, slightly slanted letters he had seen on birthday cards, shopping lists, and prison envelopes. For my husband, Taiwo. His knees weakened. Yetunde extended the envelope with both hands. She made me promise to keep this safe, she whispered. She said I must place it in your hands when you finally came home. Taiwo stared at the envelope without touching it. For 10 years, Morenike's handwriting had arrived through prison inspection rooms. Officers opened every letter before he received it, sometimes folding the pages carelessly or leaving dirty fingerprints across her words. Yet he had preserved each one as if it were sacred. This envelope had never passed through another man's hands. Where did she give you this? He asked. In the hospital, Yetunde replied. 2 weeks before she died. Taiwo finally accepted it. The paper felt soft with age. His name beneath his thumb seemed almost alive. Why did you wait 3 years to live here? Morenike allowed an elderly church member to stay first. After the woman died, the house remained empty. People began breaking in, and someone tried to claim the land. I moved here because Morenike had asked me to protect it if that happened. Taiwo wanted to demand names and dates, but his attention remained fixed on the envelope. He sat on the sofa and slowly removed the faded tape. Inside was a single sheet of paper. My beloved Taiwo, if this letter has reached you, then God has carried you back to the home we built together, but I may no longer be there to welcome you. Taiwo stopped reading. His eyes burned, yet he refused to cry in front of Yetunde. He turned slightly, hiding his face, and forced himself to continue. I know prison has taught you to distrust every hand extended toward you. Still, I ask you not to condemn Yetunde before hearing her story. She has suffered because of the same night that took away your freedom. I brought her into our home because protecting her was one way of protecting the truth. Taiwo glanced up. Yetunde stood beside the sewing table, her hands clasped tightly. She looked frightened of what the next lines might say. He returned to the letter. Do not send her and the child away until you understand why they are in danger. The people responsible for the warehouse fire have not forgotten what was hidden, and they will not stop merely because the sentence ended. A jagged tear ran across the page. Several lines had been removed, leaving only the bottom portion. Trust the photograph. Remember where we shared our happiest meals. And please forgive me for the secrets I kept. I was not trying to deceive you. I was trying to bring you home. Always yours. Morenike Taiwo. Read the letter again, slower this time. On the third reading, he held the page toward the window, examining the torn edge. Where is the missing piece? I do not know, Yetunde said. You kept this letter for 3 years. It was already damaged when Morenike gave it to me. That is a lie. It is the truth. She would not tear her own message in the middle of a warning. Yetunde's voice trembled. She was afraid the letter might fall into the wrong hands. Perhaps she removed those lines herself. Or perhaps you removed them. What would I gain? A house. Taiwo immediately regretted the accusation, but he did not withdraw it. Yetunde's face hardened with wounded dignity. If I wanted to steal this house, I would not have preserved your ownership papers or paid its charges. I would not have waited for you to return. Then show me the documents you mentioned. Yetunde entered the bedroom and came back with a plastic folder. It contained receipts, repair estimates, local government notices, and a signed statement bearing Morenike's name. The statement authorized Yetunde to occupy and maintain the property until Taiwo's release, but it did not transfer ownership. Taiwo studied Morenike's signature. It appeared genuine. Anyone can copy a signature, he said, though less firmly. There is a witness. Who? Pastor Olumide from Morenike's church. I will speak to him. You should. Her readiness unsettled him more than resistance would have. Toby returned carrying his school bag. He looked from his mother to Taiwo, trying to understand whether they were still being expelled. Do I pack my clothes too? He asked. Yetunde knelt before him. Not yet. Taiwo saw relief spread across the boy's face and felt a painful memory surface. Years earlier, his niece had stayed with him and Morenike after Kehinde lost his job. Morenike had insisted that no child should hear adults debating whether there was space for them. That memory fought against 10 years of caution. 7 days, Taiwo said. Yetunde slowly stood. What? You and the boy may remain for 7 days while I verify your story. After that, we will decide what happens. Thank you. Do not thank me. I have not agreed to anything beyond that. Toby smiled anyway. Will you stay here too? Taiwo looked down the hallway toward the bedroom he had once shared with Morenike. Yes, he said. It is my house. Yetunde prepared a small room at the back, but Taiwo refused it. He wanted his own bedroom. She did not argue. The room smelled of dust and eucalyptus. The curtains had been changed, but the wooden wardrobe was still there. So was the narrow crack in the wall that Taiwo had promised to repair for 5 years before his arrest. Morenike's side of the bed was empty. He placed his bag on the floor and sat on the mattress. For the first time since leaving prison, silence surrounded him. It was not prison silence filled with distant voices, metal doors, and guards' footsteps. This silence carried Morenike's absence. Taiwo pressed her letter against his chest. Outside, Yetunde cooked rice, while Toby practiced spelling words aloud. Their ordinary sounds entered the room through the open door. They should have felt intrusive, but instead they made the house seem less like a tomb. That evening, the three ate at the dining table. Toby asked Taiwo whether prison food tasted terrible. Yetunde apologized at once, but Taiwo surprised himself by answering. Most of it tasted like someone had described food to the cook, but never shown him any. Toby laughed. Even Yetunde smiled. For a brief moment, Taiwo remembered what it felt like to sit at a table without watching his back. Later, he locked his bedroom door. He placed a chair beneath the handle, folded his trousers, and arranged his shoes facing outward. These were habits he had learned in a place where sleep made a man vulnerable. He opened his bag and removed Morenike's old letters. He intended to compare her handwriting with the new one, but exhaustion overcame him. Near midnight, he woke suddenly. A floorboard creaked outside. Taiwo held his breath. Another sound followed a soft movement near the hallway. He rose, removed the chair, and opened the door. The house was dark. "Yetunde," he called. No answer came. He checked the kitchen. The back door was locked. Yetunde and Toby were asleep in their room. When Taiwo returned, moonlight fell across the wardrobe. One door stood slightly open. He was certain he had closed it. Taiwo searched the shelves. At first, nothing seemed disturbed. Then he noticed dust displaced around the bottom drawer. Kneeling, he pulled it open and found fresh scratches beside the lock. Someone had recently forced it. Beneath the drawer lay a small, muddy shoe print that could not belong to Yetunde or Toby. Taiwo looked toward the sleeping house, Morenike's warning repeating in his mind. The people responsible have not forgotten what was hidden. Someone had searched his bedroom before he came home, and they might return. Taiwo did not sleep again. He sat beside the bedroom window until dawn, listening for footsteps in the courtyard. No one returned. When sunlight finally entered the room, the muddy print beneath the drawer appeared even clearer. It was narrow, probably made by an adult wearing a pointed shoe. Yetunde found him examining the scratches. "I did not do this," she said before he accused her. "Who else has entered this room?" "No one with my permission. That is not what I asked." She looked toward Toby, who was eating porridge in the sitting room. 2 months ago, I came home and found the back window open. Nothing valuable was missing, so I thought it was a thief frightened away by the neighbors. Did you report it? The police told me to return only if something was stolen. Taiwo ran his thumb across the damaged wood. The person was not looking for money. Yetunde understood what he meant. Her eyes moved toward Morenike's letter on the bed. "We should speak to Pastor Olumide," she said. "He can confirm what Morenike asked me to do." Taiwo locked the bedroom before leaving, though he knew the weak door could not keep out anyone determined to enter. The church was less than 2 kilometers away. Yetunde offered to accompany him, but Taiwo insisted on going alone. He needed to know whether her story survived when she was not present to guide it. The morning streets were crowded. Traders displayed vegetables beneath umbrellas. Mechanics shouted across the road. Music played from a barber shop. Taiwo moved through it all with the cautious alertness he had developed in prison. Every sudden touch made him tense. When a young man brushed against his shoulder, Taiwo spun around with his fists raised. The man stared at him, startled. "Old man, what is wrong with you?" Taiwo lowered his hands and walked away ashamed. At a mobile money kiosk, he attempted to call Pastor Olumide using the number Yetunde had written down. The attendant handed him a smartphone, but Taiwo could not find the correct symbol. 2 teenagers nearby laughed quietly. "He does not know how to make a call," one whispered. Taiwo returned the phone and left without trying again. 10 years had not only taken Morenike, they had taken his confidence in ordinary things. The church stood behind a row of small shops. Pastor Olumide, a gentleman in his 60s, was arranging plastic chairs when Taiwo entered. He recognized Taiwo immediately. For several seconds neither man spoke. Then the pastor crossed the room and embraced him. Taiwo's body stiffened. Prison had taught him that an approaching body could mean danger. Slowly, he allowed his arms to rise. Morenike prayed for this day, Pastor Olumide said. She did not live to see it, no, but she never stopped believing it would come. Taiwo showed him the authorization document. The pastor examined the signature and pointed to his own name beneath it. I witnessed this. Why did my wife place a stranger in our house? Yetunde was not a stranger to her. She was to me. Pastor Olumide sighed. Morenike intended to explain everything, but she feared your letters were being watched. Near the end, she trusted very few people. Did she tear part of the letter? I never saw the letter. Did she tell you who threatened Yetunde? The pastor glanced toward the open church door. She spoke of powerful people connected to your former company. She believed the truth was hidden somewhere, but she never told me where. Taiwo sensed caution in his voice. Are you afraid I have a wife and grandchildren, Taiwo? So did I. The pastor lowered his eyes. Outside the church, Taiwo encountered two former neighbors, Bamidele and his wife Ronke. They had once eaten at his table during holidays. Bamidele had borrowed money from him to open a repair shop. Ronke recognized him first. Taiwo has returned, she murmured. Bamidele's face became guarded. Taiwo approached them. I heard Kehinda moved away. Do you know where he went? No, Bamidele replied quickly. Did he leave because of the trial? We should not discuss old matters. I only want to find my brother. Ronke pulled her husband's arm. Let us go. Taiwo stepped aside, but Bamidele stopped. You should consider leaving this neighborhood, he said quietly. People remember the man who died. I did not kill anyone. That is not what the court decided. The court was wrong. Bamidele looked around embarrassed to be seen with him. Just avoid trouble. Taiwo watched them walk away. His chest burned with humiliation. These people had celebrated his birthdays and called him brother. Now freedom had returned him to a place where his name remained imprisoned. When he reached the house, several women stood near the gate. One of them, Iyakemi, was complaining loudly to Yetunde. You brought a convicted killer among our children without warning us. He owns this house, Yetunde replied. Then you should take your son and leave before something happens. Taiwo stopped outside the gate. The women became silent when they noticed him. Iyakemi drew her young daughter closer. Taiwo felt the gesture like a blow. Good afternoon, he said. No one answered. The women walked away whispering. Inside, Yetunde apologized, but Taiwo went directly to his room and closed the door. He remained there until evening, unable to face the neighborhood or the noisy freedom outside it. A soft knock came after sunset. Toby entered carrying a plate of rice and stew. Mummy said, you did not eat. I am not hungry. The boy placed the plate on the floor. People at school say my father was a bad man, he said. But my mother says people can repeat a lie until it sounds like truth. Taiwo looked at him. Where is your father? He died before I was born. I am sorry. Toby shrugged with the practiced sadness of a child who had answered the same question many times. You can eat later, he said. I covered the food so flies will not touch it. After he left, Taiwo stared at the plate for a long time. Then he ate every grain. The following morning, Yetunde gave him a clean white shirt that she had altered overnight. It belonged to a customer who never returned for it, she explained. You need something decent if you are going to rebuild your life. Taiwo wanted to refuse, but the shirt fit him perfectly. She also helped him complete forms for a replacement identification card. When he struggled with the digital process, she did not laugh or show impatience. She simply explained each step. Later, Taiwo asked whether she knew what had become of his old company. Yetunde's hands stopped above the sewing machine. It no longer exists under that name. And Femi Balogun. She opened an old laptop and searched. A photograph appeared of Femi standing before a glass office tower, wearing an expensive suit and smiling beside government officials. The headline described him as the visionary founder of Balogun Urban Developments, one of Lagos's fastest-growing real estate companies. Taiwo read the list of luxury estates, commercial projects, and public contracts. The business was worth billions of naira. 10 years earlier, Femi had claimed in court that the warehouse fire ruined him. Now, his empire stretched across Lagos. Taiwo looked closer at the company logo in the photograph. It was based on the same design Taiwo had drawn when he and Femi started their first business together. Femi had not merely survived Taiwo's destruction. He had built his fortune upon it. Taiwo continued staring at Femi's photograph long after the laptop screen dimmed. The man smiling beside government officials looked older, heavier, and more polished than the partner Taiwo remembered. Yet his confident posture had not changed. Femi had always entered a room as though everything inside it already belonged to him. "How long has his company been this successful?" Taiwo asked. "Several years," Yetunde replied. "And you knew he was my former partner?" "Yes." Taiwo turned toward her. "What else have you kept from me?" Yetunde closed the laptop. "I was waiting for the right time." People use those words when they want to control the truth. Toby was at school, leaving the house unusually quiet. Yetunde looked toward the front window before speaking. "My father worked at your warehouse." Taiwo's face tightened. What was his name? Segun Akinola. The name struck him with the force of a physical blow. Segun had been the night guard declared dead in the fire, the man whose death transformed an industrial accident into a criminal case. For 10 years, Taiwo had carried the weight of that name, even though he had not caused the fire. He slowly lowered himself into a chair. "You are Segun's daughter?" "Yes." Taiwo remembered a younger Segun arriving at work before sunset, always carrying food in a round metal container. He was quiet, punctual, and painfully honest. Once, when he found a bundle of cash beneath a customer's chair, he had chased the man halfway down the street to return it. Segun had worked for them for only 8 months before the warehouse burned. "Why did you not tell me when I arrived?" Taiwo asked. "Would you have allowed me to remain, I might have understood." "You ordered me and my son out before you knew my surname." Taiwo could not deny it. Yetunde sat opposite him. "For years, I believed you killed my father." The confession was spoken softly, but it carried an old anger. "My relatives attended every day of your trial. They said you stored dangerous chemicals because you wanted to avoid paying for proper facilities. The prosecutor said my father discovered what you were doing, so you arranged the fire to silence him. That was a lie. I know that now." Taiwo rose and began pacing. The warehouse had stood in an industrial area on the mainland. Taiwo and Femi supplied cement tiles, tools, paint, and electrical materials to contractors across Lagos. Their business was not enormous, but it was growing. Taiwo managed purchasing and staff. Femi handled accounts, legal documents, and government relationships. 3 days before the fire, Taiwo had traveled to Abeokuta to meet a supplier. Femi knew exactly where he was staying. Yet during the trial, records appeared showing Taiwo had returned to Lagos secretly. A fuel receipt carried his vehicle registration number. A security camera showed a dark car similar to his. A warehouse supervisor named Kolawole testified that Taiwo had argued with Segun about missing inventory. Taiwo had never had such an argument. "I called Femi that night," Taiwo said. "He told me everything was normal." The next morning, the police came to my hotel. What did Femi say during the trial? That I had become desperate because the company owed money. He cried while speaking about Segun. The judge believed he was a grieving partner. Yetunde's mouth tightened. My mother believed him too. Taiwo looked toward her. "She was already ill when my father died," Yetunde explained. "Without his income, we could not pay for treatment." Femi attended the funeral and gave us money in front of reporters. Everyone praised him for caring about an employee's family. Did he continue helping only until the trial ended? Yetunde's mother died 11 months later. Their landlord removed them from their home, and relatives divided what little remained. Yetunde, 19 at the time, abandoned her education and worked wherever she could. The public remembered my father only when they wanted to describe you as a murderer, she said. No one cared what happened to his family afterward. Taiwo sat again, his anger giving way to shame, though the suffering had not been his choice. How did you meet Morenike? At the courthouse during your final appeal 6 years ago. Taiwo remembered that appeal. He had not been permitted to attend because of a disturbance at the prison. His lawyer later informed him that the application had failed. I went there because I wanted to see you lose again, Yetunde admitted. I hated you. When Morenike came outside, I shouted that her husband had destroyed my family. Taiwo could imagine Morenike standing before the furious young woman. She had never met cruelty with cruelty. She asked me to sit with her, Yetunde continued. I thought she wanted forgiveness. Instead, she asked what my father had told us before the fire. And what had he told you that he had discovered missing inventory and false delivery records? He said someone was using the warehouse to move materials purchased with company money. He planned to speak to the owners. Segun never spoke to me. He may have spoken to Femi. The room became very still. Yetunde explained that Morenike had shown her copies of company statements. Large payments had been approved using Taiwo's signature while he was outside Lagos. Several businesses receiving those payments later became subsidiaries of Femi's real estate company. Morenike believed the fire destroyed the original records, Yetunde said. After your conviction, Femi purchased the remaining company assets at a low price through another firm. Taiwo remembered signing documents in prison because his lawyers said they would settle debts. He had been too broken to examine them. That was how he began his empire, Taiwo murmured. Morenike believed so. Belief is not proof. She searched for proof until she became too sick to continue. Yetunde went to her bedroom and returned with a small notebook. Taiwo recognized it as one Morenike had often used for household expenses. The first pages contained dates, company names, and addresses. Some entries were written shakily, as though Morenike's hand had weakened. Beside Femi's name, she had written, "Ask who benefited from the fire." She visited former employees, Yetunde said. Most refused to speak. One disappeared after agreeing to meet her. Another warned her to stop asking questions. Why did she involve you? Because of something my father said on the afternoon before the fire. Taiwo leaned forward. Yetunde looked frightened even after all these years. He came home carrying an envelope. He told me that if anything happened to him, I should remember that the honest owner knew nothing. The honest owner. My father never used your name. I assumed he meant Femi because Femi helped us after the fire. Morenike believed he meant you. Where is the envelope? I never found it. I thought it burned with him. Taiwo opened Morenike's notebook again. Several pages had been cut out near the back. The missing pages appeared to match the size of the torn section in her letter. What did my wife find before she died? I do not know everything, Yetunde said. She became secretive after someone followed her home. Taiwo raised his eyes. That is why she prepared the house for us, Yetunde continued. She believed my father had hidden evidence and that Femi's people were still searching for it. She asked me to protect this place, but she also wanted to protect Toby and me. From Femi, yes. Why would he care about you after 10 years? Because Morenike told him she had found Segun's final message. Taiwo felt cold despite the afternoon heat. Did she truly find it? Yetunde's eyes moved toward the walls surrounding them. She never showed it to me. But before she died, she said the truth had been closer to us than anyone understood. Taiwo closed Morenike's notebook and placed it on the table. You knew Femi might still be searching this house, yet you allowed me to sleep here without warning me. I did warn you that we were in danger. Only after I found evidence of someone entering my room. Yetunde lowered her eyes. Taiwo's anger was not only about the break-in. He had shared meals with her, accepted her help, and begun to feel sympathy for her son. All the while, she had known that their lives were tied together by the warehouse fire. "You should have told me who you were the moment I arrived. I was afraid." "Of me?" "Yes." The honesty silenced him. Yetunde stood beside the sewing table, gripping the back of a chair. "For most of my adult life, your name meant the man responsible for my father's death. Morenike changed what I believed, but when you appeared at the gate, all that old fear returned. I did not know whether prison had made you bitter or dangerous. So you judged me before asking me not to judge you." "Yes," she said quietly, "and I am sorry." Taiwo walked toward the window. Outside, a vendor pushed a cart loaded with bread, while two children chased each other along the drainage channel. The neighborhood looked ordinary, yet he now felt watched from every doorway. "What property did Femi take from your family?" he asked. Yetunde seemed surprised that he had remembered. "My grandfather owned a small piece of land near Aja. My father expected to inherit it with his two brothers. After the fire, a company offered to buy the surrounding area for a housing project, which company Atlantic Crest Holdings." Taiwo recognized the name from Morenike's notebook. Yetunde explained that her uncles had signed documents they believed authorized a land survey. Months later, they discovered those papers had transferred ownership. Her father's signature appeared beside theirs, even though he was already dead when the documents were supposedly signed. "My uncles challenged the sale," she said. "They received threats and eventually withdrew the case. One left Lagos, the other stopped speaking to us." And Atlantic Crest. It later became part of Balogun Urban Developments. Taiwo returned to the notebook. Atlantic Crest appeared 4 times, connected by arrows to other unfamiliar companies. "Femi stole from your family after using your father's death to put me in prison. And we may not have been the only family." Yetunde opened a cupboard and removed a cardboard box filled with Morenike's belongings. Inside were church programs, hospital receipts, old newspapers, and envelopes marked with dates. Taiwo touched each item carefully. Morenike had preserved everything, perhaps because she knew she would not be there to explain it herself. They carried the box to the dining table and began sorting its contents. For 2 hours they found nothing directly useful. Newspaper articles repeated the same accusations from Taiwo's trial. Medical receipts showed how rapidly Morenike's illness had progressed. One envelope contained photographs of construction sites, but there were no notes identifying them. Toby returned from school and found the table covered with papers. "Is this homework for old people?" he asked. Yetunde almost smiled. "Go change your uniform." The boy picked up one photograph before leaving. "This place is near Uncle Dele's shop." Taiwo examined it. The picture showed several unfinished luxury homes behind a metal fence. "How do you know?" "The tall water tank has a purple bird painted on it." Yetunde knew the area. It had once been a settlement where low-income families rented simple houses. Balogun Urban Developments had cleared the land for a private estate. Taiwo turned the photograph over. Morenike had written only 3 numbers, 4 to 11, 6. Other photographs carried similar groups of numbers. They may be dates, Yetunde suggested, or page references. They searched the notebook. Page 4 contained a company name. Line 11 mentioned 6 land parcels, but the connection was uncertain. Taiwo remembered how Morenike used to encode the location of household money whenever relatives visited. She would write something such as "blue dress, second button," meaning the cash was in the second drawer beneath her blue fabric. These numbers were instructions, he said. She wanted someone who knew her habits to understand. They spread the photographs across the table. Numbers appeared on 7 of them. Using pages and lines from the notebook, they extracted words: deeds families, warehouse, original wall meals, photograph. Toby returned and watched them arrange the words. It does not make a sentence, he said. No, Taiwo replied, but it tells us what she was investigating. Morenike had connected missing warehouse records to original deeds stolen from families. The construction materials that disappeared from Taiwo's company might have been used in Femi's earliest developments, while forged payments hid the theft. One photograph showed Morenike standing beside 3 elderly women outside damaged houses. Taiwo recognized the location as Makoko, though much of the area had changed. Yetunde found a folded petition beneath it. 14 families claimed a developer had obtained their land using signatures they never provided. The company named in the petition was another business linked to Femi. Why did none of this appear in court? Taiwo asked. Because Morenike found it after your appeals failed. Taiwo's hands trembled with anger. His conviction was not merely about Femi escaping debt. The fire had protected a much larger operation. At the bottom of the box, they found a narrow envelope containing a list of former warehouse employees. Several names had been crossed out. Beside Kolawole, the supervisor who testified against Taiwo, Morenike had written, paid then disappeared. Another name remained circled, Akin Durojaye, assistant accountant. Do you know him? Yetunde asked. He prepared delivery records, but Femi supervised him. An address appeared beside Akin's name, followed by the words, he saw the original ledger. Taiwo felt the first fragile spark of possibility. We need to find him. Yetunde shook her head. Morenike wrote that address 6 years ago. It is still somewhere to begin. They agreed to visit the location the next morning. Until then, Taiwo returned the papers to the box and carried it into his bedroom. He pushed it beneath the bed and secured the door. That evening, the house felt different. Taiwo no longer saw Yetunde simply as an intruder. She was another person whose life had been broken by the same betrayal. Yet trust did not come easily. When she entered a room, part of him still wondered what she had not revealed. Yetunde carried similar doubts. She wanted to believe Morenike's faith in him, but memories of her father's funeral remained stronger than reason. After dinner, a loud banging shook the front gate. Toby jumped. Taiwo moved toward the courtyard, but Yetunde caught his arm. Wait! The banging stopped. No voice followed. Taiwo switched on the outside light and approached carefully. The street beyond the gate was empty. A motorcycle disappeared at the far corner. Then he saw the words painted across the metal in fresh red paint. Prison was your warning. Leave Lagos. Yetunde covered Toby's eyes, but the boy had already read it. Taiwo stood before the threat, his heart pounding. 10 years earlier, fear and confusion had silenced him, while another man built an empire from his ruin. This time, he would not leave. Taiwo photographed the warning, using Yetunde's phone before attempting to clean the gate. The red paint had already begun drying. Each time his cloth passed over the words, the color spread across the metal like a wound. Yetunde kept Toby inside, but the boy watched through the curtain. We should report it, she said. Taiwo looked down the street. Several curtains moved behind nearby windows, though no neighbor came outside. Yes, he replied. Before someone decides a warning is not enough. The local police station was already crowded when Taiwo and Yetunde arrived. A tired officer sat behind a wooden desk, listening to 2 traders argue over a missing generator. Another officer scrolled through his phone while an elderly man waited beside the wall. After nearly an hour, Sergeant Okafor called them forward. Taiwo explained the break-in and showed him the photograph of the gate. The sergeant studied the message, then examined Taiwo's release papers. You returned from prison 2 days ago, he asked. 3. And someone immediately threatened you. That is what the photograph shows. Do you have enemies? The man who framed me may be searching my house. Sergeant Okafor leaned back. Who framed you, Femi Balogun? The second officer finally looked up from his phone. The property developer, my former business partner. Sergeant Okafor's expression changed from boredom to caution. Do you have evidence connecting him to this threat? Not yet. Did anyone see who painted the gate? Was anything stolen during the break-in? We do not know. The sergeant placed the release papers on the desk. You were convicted of causing a warehouse fire that killed someone. I was wrongly convicted. The court records say otherwise. Yetunde stepped forward. Someone entered the house and searched his bedroom. Now this message has appeared. Are you going to investigate or continue questioning his conviction? Sergeant Okafor frowned. Madam, control your tone. Taiwo touched her arm, but she did not step back. My son lives in that house. Then keep him safe and avoid unnecessary trouble. That is your advice. We will record the complaint. If anything else happens, return. Taiwo felt the same helplessness he had experienced during his first interrogation 10 years earlier. Back then, every question had been designed to confirm his guilt, not discover the truth. He and Yetunde left with a reference number written on a scrap of paper. Outside, Yetunde was furious. They will do nothing. They have already decided what kind of man I am, Taiwo said. When they reached home, a woman was waiting beside the sewing table. Yetunde introduced her as Mrs. Nwosu, a regular customer who had ordered 2 dresses for her daughter's engagement ceremony. The finished dresses hung near the window, carefully pressed and covered. I came for my deposit, Mrs. Nwosu said. Yetunde stared at her. The dresses are finished. I no longer want them. But they were made to your daughter's measurements. Mrs. Nwosu glanced toward Taiwo. My husband heard about the man staying here. The man owns this house. That is not my concern. I cannot bring my family to a place connected to a convicted killer. Taiwo stepped away, hoping his absence might calm her, but Mrs. Nwosu demanded her deposit. Yetunde had already spent much of it on fabric. She emptied the money she kept inside a tin and promised to pay the remainder within 2 days. Mrs. Nwosu left without taking the dresses. By afternoon, 2 more customers canceled their orders. One sent a message saying she would not risk her safety. Another demanded that her fabric be delivered to a different tailor. Yetunde sat before her silent sewing machine, calculating what she owed. This is because of me, Taiwo said. It is because people enjoy judging what they do not understand. But you are paying the price. We were paying it before you came home. Toby returned from school with dust on his knees and a tear in his shirt. He claimed he had fallen, but Yetunde noticed bruising on his arm. Who did this? She asked. The boy avoided her eyes. Taiwo knelt beside him. Did someone speak about me? Toby's lips trembled. They said my mother lives with a murderer. I told them you did not do it. Taiwo felt shame rise inside him, though he had committed no crime. Innocence did not protect the people standing near him. That evening, he packed his small bag. Yetunde found him folding the white shirt she had given him. What are you doing? I am leaving. To go where I will find somewhere. You have no money. I survived 10 years with less. This is your home, Taiwo. And since I returned, you have lost customers. Your son has been attacked and someone has threatened us. Leaving will not protect us. Femi's connection to my family existed before you came back. But my presence has brought attention. Yetunde leaned against the doorframe. Morenike waited for you. She protected this house so you would have somewhere to return. If you walk away now, fear will accomplish what prison could not. Taiwo looked at Morenike's side of the room. I cannot watch another family suffer because of me. You did not cause my suffering. I remind people of it. Yetunde's face softened. Then help us end it. Before Taiwo could answer, Toby called from the sitting room. He was sitting on the floor beside the cardboard box of Morenike's belongings. Taiwo had forgotten to return it beneath the bed after showing Yetunde one of the coded notes. I told you not to touch these papers, Yetunde said. I was looking for the purple bird picture. Toby held up a photograph they had not noticed before. It had been stuck behind the cardboard lining at the bottom of the box. Taiwo took it carefully. The picture showed the courtyard many years earlier before the mango tree had grown tall. Morenike stood near the dining room window, smiling beside Segun Akinola. On Segun's other side stood Femi Balogun. Yetunde drew a sharp breath. My father was here. Taiwo studied the photograph. Segun appeared nervous while Femi's smile looked forced. I never knew he visited this house, Taiwo said. The photograph had been taken shortly before the warehouse fire. Taiwo was certain because Morenike wore the yellow dress he had given her for their 25th anniversary. Who took it? Yetunde asked. Taiwo could not remember. Toby pointed at the background. That wall looks strange. Behind the three adults was a section of the dining room wall. One block appeared darker than those around it, as though it had been removed and replaced. Taiwo turned the photograph over. Morenike had written a short message on the back. 3 people came carrying the truth. Only 2 understood what it meant. Below the words were 4 numbers and a small drawing of a plate. Taiwo remembered the line from her letter. Trust the photograph. Remember where we shared our happiest meals. He looked from the dining table to the wall in the picture. Whatever had brought Taiwo placed his bag back in the wardrobe. Leaving would have been easier. He could have disappeared into Lagos and allowed fear to become someone else's burden. But the photograph in his hand made escape feel like another betrayal of Morenike. He carried it to the dining room wall. The paint had changed since the picture was taken, yet the arrangement of the concrete blocks remained visible beneath the plaster. Taiwo measured the distance from the window using the 4 numbers Morenike had written. 4 blocks from the left, he murmured. 11 hand widths above the floor. And the 6, Yetunde asked. Taiwo examined the little plate beside the numbers. Perhaps 6 knocks. He tapped the wall. The first blocks produced a solid sound. At the marked position, the 6th tap echoed faintly. The space behind it was hollow. Toby moved closer, but Yetunde pulled him back. Taiwo borrowed a hammer and chisel from a neighbor. The man handed them through the gate without asking why they were needed. By then, the painted threat had made everyone cautious. Taiwo chipped away the plaster slowly. Dust fell across the floor. Beneath it, he found a rectangular wooden panel disguised to resemble concrete. His heart beat faster. Morenike had known about this hiding place. Perhaps Segun had placed the missing company ledger there. Perhaps the evidence that could have saved Taiwo had remained only a few meters from where his wife ate alone during his imprisonment. He inserted the chisel beneath the panel. The wood broke easily. Behind it was a narrow compartment, empty. Taiwo reached inside and felt every corner. He found dust, 2 dead insects, and a strip of black cloth. Nothing else. Yetunde bent near the opening. Someone removed whatever was here. When the edges are cleaner than the rest of the wall. It was opened recently. Taiwo remembered the muddy shoe print and damaged drawer. They found it before I did. Toby picked up a small piece of paper that had fallen with the dust. There is writing on this. It was a torn corner from an old newspaper. Most of the article was missing, but a name remained legible, Ireti Ogunleye. Beneath it were the words, Investigative Correspondent. Yetunde searched the name on her laptop. The results showed articles published more than a decade earlier about corruption, forced evictions, and fraudulent land sales in Lagos. Several investigated companies linked to Femi's early developments. The most recent article was 6 years old. She stopped writing around the time Morenike died, Yetunde said. Taiwo examined the newspaper fragment. Morenike must have placed it with whatever was hidden here. Finding Ireti took the rest of the day. The newspaper no longer employed her, and its receptionist refused to share personal information. Pastor Olumide remembered Morenike mentioning a female journalist, but had no address. Finally, Yetunde found an old public notice for a community meeting in Yaba. Ireti had been listed as a speaker along with a telephone number. The number still worked. A woman answered but became silent when Taiwo gave his name. "Who told you to call me?" she asked. "My wife, in a way." After another long pause, she gave them an address and instructed them to come without attracting attention. Ireti Ogunleye lived in a narrow bungalow behind a printing shop in Yaba. Security bars covered every window. She opened the door only after studying them through a gap in the curtain. She was in her late 60s with short gray hair and sharp eyes. Books and paper files filled her sitting room. Old newspapers were stacked beneath the table, and a dusty camera rested on a shelf. When she saw Taiwo, sadness crossed her face. "You look like a man who has lived several lifetimes since your trial. I feel older than all of them." Ireti looked at Yetunde. "And you are Segun's daughter." Yetunde stiffened. "You knew my father. I knew about him. Morenike spoke of you often." Taiwo placed the newspaper fragment on the table. "We found this inside a hidden compartment in my house." Ireti examined it. "This came from my investigation into Atlantic Crest, the company that stole my family's land," Yetunde said. "Your family was one of at least 19. Ireti explained that Morenike contacted her after discovering irregularities in Taiwo's former company records. Together, they traced construction materials from the warehouse to projects controlled through Femi's shell companies. "Why did you never publish it?" Taiwo asked. "We had patterns, not proof. The witnesses were afraid. Documents disappeared. My editor received legal threats, and the newspaper removed me from the investigation. You stopped writing. I was pushed into early retirement." Her voice remained controlled, but the bitterness was clear. Taiwo showed her the photograph of Morenike, Segun, and Femi. Ireti held it closer to the window. "I have never seen this." "Segun visited my house before the fire," Taiwo said. "I was not there, and Morenike never mentioned it. Perhaps she was protecting you. Protection cost me 10 years. Ireti's eyes softened. She carried that guilt until the end. Taiwo looked away. Yetunde asked what Morenike believed had been hidden in the wall. An original ledger, possibly land deeds, Ireti answered. Segun discovered that warehouse inventory was being redirected to illegal projects. He began copying delivery information. "My father could barely afford rent," Yetunde said. "Why would he risk challenging powerful men? Because honest people often believe truth will protect them." The sentence left the room silent. Ireti retrieved a thick file marked with Morenike's initials. Inside were interview notes, maps, and photographs. One page described the night of the warehouse fire. "The official report said Segun died immediately," Taiwo said. That was not what Morenike believed. Ireti showed them a statement from a roadside food seller named Alaba. On the night of the fire, Alaba had seen an injured man emerge through a rear exit. He leaned against a wall, holding something beneath his shirt. A dark vehicle arrived minutes later. 2 men forced him inside. "Why was this not presented at my trial?" Taiwo demanded. "Alaba disappeared before your lawyer could interview her. The police claimed she never existed." Yetunde's face had gone pale. "Are you saying my father survived?" "Not for long," Ireti said gently. A body identified as Segun was recovered after the building collapsed, but Morenike believed he escaped the first flames and lived long enough to move the evidence. "Move it where?" Taiwo asked. Ireti pointed to the photograph. "Your house may not have been the first hiding place. Segun could have brought something there before the fire realized Femi knew and moved it again." Taiwo studied Femi's smiling face beside Segun. "What did Morenike discover before she died?" Ireti hesitated, then opened a small notebook. 3 days before her final hospital admission, she called me. She said she finally understood Segun's last decision. What decision to hide the truth where the man who betrayed him would never think to look? And where was that? She refused to say over the phone. She planned to tell me in person, but she never left the hospital. Yetunde pressed both hands against her mouth. Ireti then removed a sealed folder from her file. Morenike made me promise not to open this unless Taiwo returned, and the house had already been searched. Taiwo looked at the broken seal along one edge. Someone else had opened it first. Inside, a single page remained. Across it, Morenike had written 3 words. Find the original witness. Ireti placed Morenike's message beneath the lamp. Find the original witness, Taiwo read again. She may have meant Akin Durojaye. The assistant accountant Yetunde asked. He handled the warehouse records before Femi took control of them. Ireti searched through her files and found notes from an interview Morenike had conducted 6 years earlier. Akin had refused to speak inside his home. He believed someone monitored his movements and insisted that all original records were destroyed. But Morenike had written one question beneath the interview. If everything burned, why did Akin keep paying for storage near Oshodi Market? Beside it was a receipt number. The next morning, Taiwo, Yetunde, and Ireti traveled to Oshodi. Toby remained with Pastor Olumide, though he protested that he was old enough to help. Yetunde promised they would return before sunset. The market overwhelmed Taiwo. Traders filled every available space with clothes, electronics, food, and household goods. Porters pushed heavy carts through crowds, while bus conductors shouted destinations above the noise. Ireti led them to a row of storage units behind an aging commercial building. Many had been converted into workshops, but the final unit remained locked. The manager, Alhaji Musa, examined Morenike's receipt. This account belonged to Akin Durojaye, he said. No one has paid for it in 4 years. Then why is it still locked? Taiwo asked. An elderly woman paid several years in advance. She said the owner would return, Morenike Yetunde whispered. Alhaji Musa studied Taiwo's identification and release documents. After much persuasion, he searched through an old register. Morenike had listed Taiwo as the person authorized to claim the unit. The lock was covered with rust. Alhaji Musa broke it using a heavy cutter. Inside, dust lay across metal shelves and broken office furniture. A faded filing cabinet stood against the rear wall. There were no ledgers or boxes of documents. They came here too, Yetunde said. Taiwo noticed scratches around the cabinet lock. Someone had searched the drawers and left them open. Ireti examined the floor. Not recently. This dust has been undisturbed for years. They searched for almost an hour. Taiwo inspected the shelves while Yetunde opened damaged folders containing old invoices. Nothing seemed useful. Then Ireti found a small wooden stool nailed to the floor. Why would anyone secure a stool? Taiwo turned it over and discovered a thin metal plate attached beneath the seat. Behind it was a plastic package wrapped against moisture. Inside were photocopies of delivery records, land deeds, and payment instructions. Taiwo recognized his company letterhead. Several orders carried his signature, but he had never approved them. Materials worth millions of naira had been delivered to construction sites belonging to companies he had never heard of at the time. Ireti compared the names with her investigation files. Atlantic Crest, Meridian Shelter, Crown Harbor Properties, she said. All later became part of Femi's empire. Yetunde found a deed bearing Segun's signature. It transferred his family's land 6 months after his death. My father did not sign this. Look at the witness, Ireti said. The witness was Kolawole, the warehouse supervisor who had testified against Taiwo. The documents revealed a pattern. Vulnerable families were persuaded to sign survey forms, while replacement pages transferred ownership. Construction materials were taken from Taiwo's company to develop the stolen land. When Segun discovered the records, the warehouse burned. This can expose Femi, Yetunde said. It can establish fraud, Ireti cautioned, but these are copies. We still need proof connecting him directly to the fire and Taiwo's conviction. Taiwo found a handwritten note from Akin. I copied what I could. Sigun carried the originals. FB knows he took them. If I speak, my children will suffer. Below the message was a list of payments made to Kolawole before and after the trial. Taiwo sat on the dusty floor. For 10 years, strangers had told him that his insistence on innocence was denial. Now he held evidence that another man had profited from his imprisonment. Yet he felt no victory. Morenike should have been beside him. She found this place, he said. She came here while she was dying. Yetunde sat beside him. She wanted you to come home with your name restored. But I came home after they buried her. You still came home. Taiwo's eyes filled with tears. This time he did not hide them. Yetunde rested one hand on his shoulder. They remained there in silence, connected by 2 dead parents, 1 lost wife, and a truth that had wounded them both. They carried the documents to Ireti's bungalow, where she scanned every page and stored digital copies on 2 memory drives. One remained with her. Taiwo took the other, along with the original package. Tell no one what we found, Ireti warned. Not even the police yet. When Taiwo and Yetunde collected Toby, the boy ran to meet them. Did you find the truth? We found part of it, Taiwo replied. Toby held his hand as they walked home. Taiwo almost pulled away from habit, then allowed the boy's small fingers to remain around his own. That evening, they ate beans and plantain at the dining table. Toby described his school day, while Yetunde laughed at his imitation of a strict teacher. Taiwo listened, feeling an unfamiliar warmth. For the first time since Morenike's death, he did not feel like a visitor among the living. After Toby went to bed, Yetunde washed the dishes, while Taiwo secured the documents inside his wardrobe. Her phone rang. She glanced at the number and immediately stepped into the courtyard. Taiwo heard only fragments. How did you get this number? A pause followed. No, leave my son out of this. When Yetunde returned, her face was pale. Who called? Taiwo asked. A customer. You do not speak to customers as if they threatened your child. It was nothing. Taiwo waited, but she refused to explain. The following morning, Yetunde left before sunrise. She placed breakfast on the table and told Toby she had to collect fabric from a supplier. Hours passed. Taiwo tried calling her, but her phone was switched off. Near noon, he entered his bedroom to retrieve the documents for Ireti. The wardrobe was locked, yet the key he had hidden beneath the mattress was gone. He forced the door open. The plastic package had disappeared. So had the memory drive. Taiwo searched every shelf, then noticed something missing from the hallway hook. Yetunde's handbag was gone. On the dining table lay an unfamiliar business card bearing the gold logo of Balogan Urban Developments. Beneath it, someone had written an address and a time. Taiwo looked toward Toby, who was waiting near the window for his mother. Yetunde had been summoned to meet Femi, and she had taken the evidence with her. Taiwo called Ireti immediately. Yetunde took the documents, he said. There is a card from Femi's company on the table. Ireti became silent. The memory drive, too, yes. I still have scanned copies. But Femi may now know exactly what we found. Toby stood in the hallway listening. His eyes were wide with fear. My mother is not a thief, he said. Taiwo wanted to reassure him, but betrayal had shaped too much of his life. Femi had once called him brother. Kolawole had testified against him after years of loyal employment. Even Kehinde had disappeared when Taiwo needed him most. Trust had always demanded a price. We are going to Pastor Olumide's house, Taiwo told the boy. Are you leaving me there? Only until I find your mother. Toby reluctantly packed his school bag. During the walk to the pastor's home, he asked repeatedly whether Yetunde was in danger. Taiwo could not answer. After leaving him with the pastor, Taiwo followed the address on the business card. Balogan Urban Developments occupied a glass tower on Victoria Island. Its entrance was brighter than any building Taiwo had entered before. Security guards stood beside polished doors, while luxury vehicles moved through the underground parking area. Taiwo remained across the street. The company's gold logo rose above the entrance, the same design he had once sketched on a piece of paper, while he and Femi dreamed of building an honest business. Now, that symbol made him feel ill. Nearly an hour passed before Yetunde appeared. She walked through the glass doors, clutching a thick cream envelope. A black car waited near the entrance. Before she could reach the pavement, Femi emerged behind her. Taiwo recognized him instantly. Femi wore a dark tailored suit and moved with the confidence of a man accustomed to being obeyed. He placed one hand on Yetunde's shoulder and leaned close to speak. She stiffened, but did not pull away. Then Femi smiled. It was the same sympathetic smile he had displayed during the trial while describing Taiwo as a reckless partner destroyed by greed. Yetunde nodded and entered the car. Taiwo felt something inside him collapse. He had believed her grief. He had allowed Toby to hold his hand. He had mistaken their shared pain for loyalty. The car drove away before he could cross the street. Femi remained outside for several seconds, looking toward the road. His gaze passed over Taiwo without recognition. To him, Taiwo was only another aging man in worn clothes. Taiwo returned home and waited. Yetunde arrived shortly before evening. When she entered the sitting room, she stopped at the sight of him. "Where is Toby?" "With Pastor Olumide." She moved toward the door. "I am going to get him. Not until you explain what you did. My son should not be away from me, and those documents should not be away from me." Yetunde's face tightened. Taiwo pointed to the envelope in her handbag. "How much did Femi pay you?" "It is not what you think. I saw you leaving his office. You followed me. You took evidence from my locked wardrobe. I had no choice. There is always a choice." Yetunde looked toward the windows, then lowered her voice. "Please do not ask me to explain this now. I trusted you. I never asked you to. No. You only asked me to let you live in my house, believe your story, and risk my freedom, while you carried our evidence to the man who framed me." Tears gathered in her eyes, but Taiwo's anger prevented him from seeing them as anything but guilt. What was inside the envelope, he demanded? Money. The admission hurt more than denial. How much enough to leave Lagos? Taiwo stepped back as if she had struck him. Femi had threatened Toby during the phone call. He knew the boy's school, the route Yetunde walked each morning, and even the name of Toby's teacher. He had ordered Yetunde to bring every document recovered from the storage unit. If she warned Taiwo or contacted the police, Toby would suffer. Yet she could not tell Taiwo that. Femi had insisted that someone was watching the house. To protect her son, she had allowed Femi to believe she could be bought. But Taiwo knew none of this. "Did Morenike ever trust you?" he asked. "Or did you deceive her too?" Yetunde's grief turned into anger. "Do not use her name to punish me. She gave you shelter. I gave you time. You repaid both of us by selling the truth. You think everything is about what was taken from you. I lost 10 years. And I lost my father, my mother, my education, and every safe place I ever had. I did not cause that. Neither did I cause your imprisonment." They stood on opposite sides of the room, both wounded by truths that had become weapons. Yetunde removed the cream envelope and placed it on the table. "Keep the money. I do not want Femi's money. Then burn it." She went to collect Toby. Taiwo watched her leave, feeling the house become empty again. Part of him wanted to follow and demand the missing documents. Another part was too tired to endure one more betrayal. Iriti arrived after dark. "We still have the scans," she reminded him. "Copies will not be enough. They establish a pattern. We can take them to a lawyer. Femi will call them fabricated. Iridi opened the envelope. Inside were bundles of cash and a typed agreement stating that Yetunde had sold certain family documents to Balogun Urban Developments. Her signature appeared at the bottom. Taiwo's final doubt disappeared. She signed it. Iridi read the agreement carefully. Something is strange. The signature does not match the one on Morenike's authorization document. She may have written quickly, or deliberately changed it. Taiwo shook his head. Do not defend her. The next morning, Yetunde returned with Toby. She had decided to pack their belongings. The boy cried when she told him they were leaving. Did Grandpa Taiwo send us away? He asked. Taiwo heard the word Grandpa from the hallway and felt his anger weaken, but Yetunde answered before he could speak. We are leaving because it is safer. Where will we go? I will find somewhere. Taiwo remained silent. He wanted to ask why she had altered her signature, but pride held him back. Before Yetunde could finish packing, 3 vehicles stopped outside. 2 court enforcement officers entered the courtyard with a lawyer and several uniformed policemen. Neighbors gathered across the street. The lawyer introduced himself as Babatunde Salami, representing Balogun Urban Developments. This property is under a court possession order, he announced. Taiwo stepped forward. This house belongs to me, not according to the registered deed. The lawyer handed him a stamped document. It claimed Taiwo had transferred ownership to Atlantic Crest Holdings 9 years earlier to settle company debts. Atlantic Crest had since merged with Femi's business. I was in prison 9 years ago. Your signature was witnessed by your brother, Yetunde Adeyemi. Taiwo stared at the page. Yetunde's name and signature appeared beneath his own. The lawyer pointed toward the bedrooms. You have 48 hours to remove your belongings. After that, this property will be surrendered to its legal owner, Mr. Femi Balogun. Taiwo looked at Yetunde. She appeared genuinely horrified, but he no longer knew whether he could believe her. Femi had taken his business, his freedom, and his reputation. Now he had come for the last place Taiwo could still call home. The 48 hours passed with cruel speed. Iridi contacted a legal aid lawyer named Barrister Funmi Adebayo, who filed an emergency request to suspend the possession order. She argued that Taiwo could not have signed a property transfer while imprisoned without official witnesses. The court clerk accepted the papers, but offered no promise that a judge would review them in time. The order against you was processed unusually quickly, Funmi told Taiwo. Someone powerful wants control of that house before we can challenge the deed. Taiwo knew who that person was. He spent the first day packing Morenike's belongings into cardboard boxes. Every object carried a memory: her blue scarf, the chipped cup she used for tea, and the Bible in which she had marked prayers for prisoners. Yetunde tried to help, but Taiwo refused to speak to her. Toby followed him from room to room. Will they take the mango tree too? The boy asked. They cannot carry away a tree, but they can destroy it. Taiwo had no answer. That evening, Yetunde stood outside his bedroom. I need to tell you what happened at Femi's office. You had 2 days to tell me. I thought someone was watching the house. And now they already have what they wanted. Taiwo continued folding Morenike's dresses. Yetunde placed her phone on the bed and opened an audio file. Femi's voice emerged through the small speaker. You have one opportunity to protect your son. Bring me every paper you found. The recording crackled. Yetunde's voice followed. And if I refuse, then Toby may not reach school safely tomorrow. Taiwo stopped moving. The next part contained only the sound of fabric rubbing against the hidden phone. Then Femi spoke again. Sign the agreement. Take the money. Let Adeyemi believe you betrayed him. The recording ended abruptly. Why did you not play this before? Taiwo asked. He knew details about Toby's classroom. He said your house was being watched. If I told you, I feared he would carry out the threat. You took the original documents. I gave him the package, but I removed Aiken's handwritten note and 2 deeds before I went. Where are they with Pastor Olumide? Taiwo stared at her. And the agreement? I changed my signature. I wanted proof that the transaction was made under pressure. What about the money? I accepted it, so he would believe me. Why is the recording incomplete? A security guard searched my bag. I had to stop it before I entered the main office. Taiwo listened again. Femi never said his full name. He never mentioned the warehouse fire or admitted forging evidence. A skilled lawyer could claim the voices were unidentified or that the conversation had been edited. It proves he threatened your son, Taiwo said. If we can prove the voice is his. Taiwo sank onto the bed. I accused you of betraying Morenike. Yes, I was wrong. Yetunde's eyes filled with tears. You were frightened. So was I. Fear does not excuse what I said. No. But it explains why we both keep hurting people before they can hurt us. For a moment, neither spoke. Taiwo wanted forgiveness, but he understood that some apologies needed time before they could become healing. He told Yetunde that she and Toby did not have to leave alone. We will face whatever comes together, he said. The following morning, court officers returned with police and a moving truck. Fumi's request had not yet reached a judge. Taiwo stood in the courtyard holding his ownership papers. This order is based on a forged deed, he told the senior officer. You may challenge it in court, the man replied. Today we are required to enforce it. Neighbors gathered along the road. Some watched with satisfaction, believing justice was finally removing a convicted man. Others looked ashamed, but remained silent. Mama Bisola crossed the street carrying an empty fruit crate. You can put books inside this, she told Taiwo. It was the first kindness she had shown him since his return. Soon, another neighbor offered rope. A young mechanic brought a handcart. Their small acts did not stop the eviction, but they reminded Taiwo that not every heart had closed against him. Yetunde packed her sewing machine and unfinished dresses. Toby carried his school bag and toy car. When an officer lifted Morenike's box carelessly, Taiwo caught it before it fell. Please, he said, holding it close. This is all I have left of my wife. By midday, their belongings stood beside the road. The lawyer, Babatunde Salami, arrived to inspect the property. Mr. Balogan intends to redevelop this land, he announced. Demolition will begin after final clearance. Redevelop, Taiwo asked. You said he wanted possession. The building is unsafe. It was safe enough when his people searched it. Babatunde ignored him. Funmi arrived carrying a stamped application. She demanded that no structural changes occur until the ownership dispute was heard. Babatunde glanced at the paper and smiled. This is an application, not an injunction. The judge will review it tomorrow. Then perhaps you should have filed yesterday. Taiwo stepped toward him, but Ireti caught his arm. Any confrontation could be used to return him to prison. The officers changed the locks. Taiwo stood outside the gate as strangers secured the house Morenike had protected through illness and fear. Toby slipped his hand into Taiwo's. Where will we sleep? Ireti has offered us space. Will we ever come back? Taiwo looked at the number 17 beside the gate. Yes, he said, though he did not know whether it was true. They carried their belongings to Ireti's bungalow. Her home was too small for 4 people, but she arranged mattresses on the sitting room floor. Yetunde placed her sewing machine beside the kitchen. Taiwo stacked Morenike's boxes near the wall. That night, rain began falling. Taiwo lay awake beneath the sound of water against the roof. He kept remembering Morenike's words. Remember where we shared our happiest meals. They had opened the wall beside the dining table and found an empty compartment. Perhaps they had misunderstood. Perhaps the plate she drew referred not to the wall, but to something beneath the table. Taiwo sat up. He whispered. Iriti switched on the light. What is it Morenike wrote about the place where we ate, not the wall? We searched beside it, but we never searched beneath it. Yetunde rose from her mattress. Before they could decide what to do, Ireti's phone rang. It was Mama Bisola. Machines arrived at Taiwo's house, she said urgently. They are not waiting for tomorrow. Taiwo ran outside with Yetunde and Ireti behind him. By the time they reached the neighborhood, powerful lights illuminated the property. A demolition vehicle stood before the gate. Workers had already removed part of the fence. Fumi's application meant nothing without a judge's signed order. A machine struck the front wall. Concrete collapsed into the courtyard. Taiwo shouted for them to stop, but the workers continued. Another section broke apart, sending dust through the house where Morenike's secrets had waited for years. The dining room wall trembled. Taiwo watched helplessly as the machine moved closer to the place beneath which the final truth might be buried. Taiwo pushed through the open gate, but a police officer blocked him. "My family's property is inside," Taiwo shouted. "The building is no longer yours. The ownership is being challenged." Behind the officer, the demolition machine struck another section of wall. Concrete crashed into the sitting room, crushing the cabinet that had protected Morenike's photographs. Yetunde raised her phone and recorded everything. Iriti called Barrister Funmi, while neighbors shouted at the workers to stop. Even those who had condemned Taiwo seemed disturbed by the destruction. Funmi arrived 20 minutes later with 2 police officers from a different division and a temporary instruction from the duty judge. It was not the full injunction she had requested, but it suspended demolition until noon the following day. Babatunde argued that the work had already begun. Funmi threatened to hold him personally responsible for destroying disputed evidence. At last, the machine fell silent. The front wall and part of the sitting room were gone. The roof leaned dangerously above exposed rooms. Dust covered the courtyard, and broken furniture lay beneath pieces of concrete. The dining area remained standing, but cracks had spread across one wall. Taiwo tried to enter. Funmi stopped him. "The structure is unstable. If you go inside tonight, they can accuse you of trespassing and violating the possession order. That floor may contain the evidence we need. Then we will request supervised access tomorrow. By tomorrow, Femi will send someone to remove it. I will ask the police to guard the property." Taiwo looked at the officers. Neither appeared eager to protect anything belonging to a former prisoner. Still, he had no choice but to leave. Back at Ireti's bungalow, the 4 adults sat in exhausted silence. Toby had remained with Pastor Olumide during the confusion. When he returned, he looked at the dust on Taiwo's clothes and understood that the house had been damaged. "Did they cut down the mango tree?" "Not yet," Taiwo answered. The boy sat beside his mother and said nothing else. Rainwater entered through a leak in Ireti's roof. Buckets crowded the narrow hallway. Morenike's boxes occupied the sitting room corner, while folded mattresses blocked the doorway. Yetunde had nowhere to operate her sewing machine. Taiwo slept beside stacks of newspapers and woke whenever anyone crossed the room. By morning, the pressure of failure had settled over him. Funmi called to say the hearing had been postponed because Femi's lawyers challenged the judge's temporary instruction. Police access to the property was also delayed. Taiwo listened without speaking. After the call, he opened his small bag and began folding his clothes. Yetunde watched him. "Where are you going, I do not know. We have already had this conversation. This time is different. Femi owns the police, the court schedule, and every document with my name on it. He does not own the truth. The truth has been hidden for 10 years while he became rich." Ireti lowered the newspaper she was reading. "Powerful men depend on exhausted people surrendering." "I am exhausted," Taiwo replied. "I am 68 years old. My wife is dead. My brother helped steal my house. Every piece of evidence arrives after the damage has already been done. Yetunde approached him. "If you leave, what should I tell Toby? Tell him I was not strong enough. He calls you grandpa." "He should not." The words hurt Yetunde, but they wounded Taiwo more deeply. He wanted to be someone the boy could trust, yet everyone who stood near him seemed to lose something. He closed his bag. Toby had entered unnoticed. In his hands was the one-wheeled toy car. Mama Morenike said, "Old people sometimes forget because their hearts are too full," he said. Taiwo looked at him. "What did you say?" "When we first moved into the house, she told me stories at bedtime." Yetunde frowned. "Morenike died before we moved there. She told me at Pastor Olumide's house when I was little. You were sewing for the church." Yetunde slowly remembered taking Toby to the hospital during Morenike's final weeks. She had assumed he was too young to understand their conversations. What stories, Ireti asked. Toby pushed his toy car across the floor. "She told me about a tortoise who kept treasure beneath the place where everyone shared food. She always said the same thing before I slept." "What thing?" Taiwo asked. The boy concentrated. "When the walls lose, their voices count 3 steps from the chair that never moved. The quiet stone will remember." Taiwo's bag slipped from his hand. In their dining room, Morenike always sat in the same chair near the kitchen doorway. She refused to move it, even when they bought a larger table, because it gave her a clear view of the courtyard. "The chair that never moved," he whispered. Ireti understood first. 3 floor tiles from Morenike's place. The tiles were installed before the photograph was taken, Taiwo said. Segun could have hidden something beneath one of them. Yetunde grabbed her handbag. The demolition suspension ended in less than an hour. They called Funmi while traveling to the house. She instructed them not to enter until she arrived, but when they reached the street, the demolition crew was already preparing the machine. Babatunde stood beside the gate. "The suspension has expired," he said. "Not for another 40 minutes, Ireti replied, showing the time on her phone. Funmi arrived with a court clerk authorized to supervise a search for personal property. Babatunde protested, but the clerk allowed Taiwo 10 minutes inside. The damaged roof creaked above him. Yetunde and Ireti waited near the doorway while Taiwo crossed the debris-covered dining area. Morenike's chair was gone, but marks on the floor showed where it had stood for years. Taiwo counted 3 tiles. The third looked identical to the others until he knelt and tapped it. The sound beneath was duller. He struck the edge with a hammer. Once. Twice. On the 3rd blow, the tile cracked. Beneath it was packed earth. Taiwo dug with his hands. 5 minutes, the court clerk warned. His fingers touched metal. Yetunde rushed forward and helped remove the soil. Together they exposed the lid of a rectangular box wrapped in decaying plastic. Babatunde stepped into the room. "That belongs to the property owner." "It was hidden while Taiwo owned the house," Funmi said, blocking him. "It may be evidence in an active criminal matter." Taiwo pulled the box free. It was heavier than he expected. A small rusted padlock secured the lid, and the initials S.A. had been scratched into one corner. Segun Akinola. Yetunde covered her mouth as tears filled her eyes. Outside, the demolition operator started the engine. The room vibrated, sending dust from the damaged ceiling. Taiwo carried the box into the courtyard. For 10 years, Femi had controlled the story of the warehouse fire. He had controlled witnesses' records, property, and fear. Now the last secret Segun and Morenike died protecting was finally in Taiwo's hands. Funmi refused to open the metal box at the house. Too many people were watching, including Babatunde and the demolition workers. She photographed the box from every angle, placed it inside an evidence bag, and obtained signatures from the court clerk, Taiwo, and Yetunde, confirming where it had been found. "The chain of custody must be clean," she explained. Femi's lawyers will challenge every object inside. They carried the box to the office of an independent forensic examiner. Ireti recorded the opening on video while 2 witnesses observed. The rusted lock broke beneath a cutting tool. Inside were several packages wrapped in oilcloth. The first contained original land deeds belonging to families from Aja Makoko and 2 other communities. Some carried genuine signatures. Others had replacement pages attached with different ink and altered dates. A second package held the original warehouse ledger. Taiwo recognized Segun's neat handwriting beside the nightly deliveries. Entire truckloads of cement tiles, paint, and electrical materials had been redirected to construction sites controlled by Femi's companies. Payments were approved using forged versions of Taiwo's signature. The third package contained Morenike's complete written testimony. She described meeting Segun at the house 6 days before the fire. He had arrived frightened and carrying copied records. Femi appeared unexpectedly, claiming he had followed Segun because company documents had been stolen. According to Morenike, the 2 men argued in the dining room. Segun accused Femi of using shell companies to steal land and materials. Femi denied everything, then offered Segun money to remain silent. Morenike took the photograph secretly using a timer because she feared no one would believe the meeting occurred. Segun hid copies in the wall, but later told Morenike the originals were safer elsewhere. After the fire and Taiwo's arrest, Morenike moved the remaining evidence beneath the dining room floor. Taiwo stopped reading when he reached the final paragraph. "My husband was innocent, but I was afraid. Femi warned me that Taiwo could die in prison if I continued searching. I lost years to fear before I understood that silence was also helping him. If this testimony is found after my death, let it speak where I failed to speak." Taiwo pressed the page to his chest. Morenike had not failed him. She had fought while sick, threatened, and alone. The fact that she could not defeat Femi during her lifetime did not diminish her courage. Yetunde opened the final package. Inside was a small voice recorder, its plastic casing partly melted. A note identified it as Segun's property. The battery had corroded, and the memory compartment showed heat damage. "Can anything be recovered?" Yetunde asked. The forensic examiner would not promise. For 3 days, specialists worked on the recorder. During that time, Funmi filed motions to stop the demolition, challenge the property deed, preserve Femi's company records, and reopen Taiwo's criminal case. Femi responded aggressively. His lawyers claimed the metal box had been planted. They accused Taiwo, Yetunde, and Ireti of creating false evidence to extort a respected businessman. Femi appeared on television and described himself as the victim of a campaign led by a bitter, convicted criminal. Many people believed him, but Ireti no longer depended on one newspaper or one frightened editor. She sent verified copies of the deeds and ledger to several independent journalists, civil rights organizations, and families whose land had been stolen. By the following morning, the documents were spreading across Nigeria. Elderly residents recognized their original deeds. Former employees identified signatures and delivery codes. Videos appeared online, showing families removed from properties later developed by Balogun Urban Developments. For the first time, Femi could not control every voice. An emergency court hearing was scheduled to determine whether the house should remain standing and whether the evidence justified reopening Taiwo's conviction. The courtroom was crowded. Taiwo sat between Funmi and Ireti. Yetunde remained behind them with Pastor Olumide and Toby. Across the aisle, Femi wore a dark suit and an expression of calm superiority. It was the first time he had looked directly at Taiwo in 10 years. During a recess, Femi approached. "You should have remained grateful for your release," he said quietly. "Grateful for receiving what should never have been taken. You cannot recover 10 years by destroying my name. I did not destroy your name. You buried it beneath everything you stole." Femi smiled. A damaged recorder and papers found in a convicted man's house will not defeat me." Taiwo looked into the face of the man he had once trusted. "You are afraid." The smile disappeared. When the hearing resumed, Femi's lead lawyer argued that Morenike's statement was hearsay and that the ledger could have been fabricated. He asked the judge to seal the evidence and prohibit Ireti from releasing further material. Funmi called the forensic examiner. The paper, ink, and signatures were consistent with documents created before the warehouse fire. The box showed long-term soil exposure. Most importantly, technicians had recovered audio from Segun's recorder. The courtroom became silent as the recording played. Segun's voice was weak beneath heavy static. "If anything happens to me," Femi Balogun ordered it. "He has moved our supplies through Atlantic Crest. He forged Taiwo's approvals. Taiwo knows nothing." A second voice interrupted. "Give me the recorder, Segun." Taiwo recognized Femi instantly. Segun refused. Sounds of movement followed. Then Femi spoke again, clearer this time. "The warehouse will burn before Taiwo sees those records. By the time he understands, every witness will point at him." Femi stood abruptly. "This is fabricated." The judge ordered him to sit. The recording continued with Segun describing the missing deeds and payments to Kolawole. His final words were directed toward Yetunde. "My daughter, forgive me if honesty leaves you alone. I pray the truth reaches you one day." Yetunde wept silently. Femi's lawyers demanded an immediate technical review. Funmi agreed, knowing the file's digital history and Segun's voice could be independently verified. Then, Yetunde asked to address the court. She produced the cream envelope Femi had given her. His lawyer objected, arguing that she had willingly accepted payment. Yetunde removed the cash and pulled apart the envelope's inner lining. Hidden behind it was a folded sheet she had discovered while packing at Ireti's home. The instructions were written in Femi's hand. "Deliver all documents recovered from Akin's storage unit. Sign the agreement. Accept 10 million naira. Leave Lagos with the boy. Make Taiwo believe you sold him out." Below those words, Femi had added, "Once the house is empty, demolish it before the court can interfere." A handwriting specialist had already compared the note with Femi's verified business records. It was a match. Funmi also played Yetunde's recording of Femi threatening Toby. Alone, it had been incomplete. Combined with his written instructions, the original ledger, Morenike's testimony, and Segun's recovered voice, it revealed a single chain of fear, bribery, fraud, and destruction. The judge studied Femi for a long moment. Then, she ordered the immediate suspension of every Balogun urban developments project connected to the disputed deeds. She also directed the police and anti-corruption authorities to open a criminal investigation before anyone could leave the courthouse. Femi's confidence finally broke. For 10 years, Taiwo had watched powerful people walk away while he remained behind locked doors. Now officers moved toward Femi, and the courtroom doors closed. Femi did not leave the courthouse as a free man. Investigators detained him for questioning while officers searched the offices of Balogun Urban Developments. Computers, contracts, financial records, and property files were seized before employees could destroy them. Within days, the evidence expanded far beyond Taiwo's case. Bank records showed payments to Kolawole before and after the original trial. Femi had also paid a police officer who claimed Taiwo's car was seen near the warehouse. Atlantic Crest had transferred money to Kehinde shortly before he witnessed the forged deed that stole Taiwo's house. Funmi eventually located Kehinde in Ibadan. He returned to Lagos looking older and deeply ashamed. During a private meeting, he could barely face his brother. "Femi told me you would never leave prison," Kehinde confessed. "He offered enough money to settle my debts if I signed as a witness." "You knew the house was Morenike's only security," Taiwo said. "I told myself Femi would allow her to remain there. You sold our home and then disappeared." Kehinde began to cry. I was a coward. Taiwo had imagined this confrontation for years. He expected to shout or strike the table. Instead, he felt only exhaustion. I cannot forgive you today, he said, but I will not carry hatred for the rest of my life. If you truly regret what you did, tell the court everything, Yetunde agreed. His testimony helped expose the forged property transfer and Femi's plan to demolish the house before Taiwo could find the metal box. 3 months later, the Court of Appeal formally overturned Taiwo's conviction. The courtroom was quieter than the emergency hearing. There were no shouting reporters and no dramatic arguments. The judge simply stated that Taiwo's conviction had resulted from fabricated evidence, corrupted witnesses, and a deliberate failure of justice. Mr. Taiwo Adeyemi, she said, you leave this court with your innocence recognized and your name restored. Taiwo remained seated. He had waited 10 years to hear those words, yet they did not return Morenike or erase the nights he had slept on a concrete floor. Justice could correct a record, but it could not reverse time. Yetunde squeezed his hand. You can stand now, she whispered. Taiwo rose slowly. Outside, reporters crowded around him. Some asked whether he planned to seek revenge. Others wanted to know how much compensation he would demand. Taiwo looked toward the sky. I do not want revenge, he said. I want every person harmed by this corruption to receive the justice they were denied. And I want people to remember that a prison sentence does not always mean the truth has been found. The investigations continued for nearly a year. Femi was charged with conspiracy fraud, bribery, destruction of evidence threats, and involvement in the warehouse fire. Kolawole returned from hiding and confessed that he had lied during Taiwo's trial. Several officials were also arrested. Courts invalidated dozens of fraudulent property transfers. Families who had been removed from their land received restitution, new housing, or financial compensation. Yetunde and her uncles recovered legal ownership of the Akinola family property. Taiwo's house was returned to him. The front rooms had been badly damaged and rain had entered through the broken roof. When Taiwo first walked through the ruined doorway, he felt grief rather than victory. Toby ran toward the mango tree. It survived, he shouted. Its branches were covered in dust, but green leaves remained. Taiwo touched the trunk he had planted with Morenike and understood that survival did not require remaining untouched. The tree bore scars just as he did, but its roots were still alive. The government awarded Taiwo compensation for his wrongful imprisonment. It was a significant amount, though no amount could equal 10 lost years. Many people advised him to build a luxurious home or leave Lagos. Instead, Taiwo gathered Yetunde Ireti Funmi and Pastor Olumide beneath the mango tree. I want to rebuild this place, he said, but not only as a house. He proposed creating a center where people facing wrongful accusations could receive legal guidance. Yetunde suggested adding a vocational room for widows, former prisoners, and young people who needed practical skills. They named it the Morenike and Segun Justice and Skills Center. Construction began during the dry season. Taiwo insisted that the mango tree remain untouched. The new building included a legal aid office, classrooms, a sewing workshop, and a small community kitchen. One original wall from the old house was preserved inside the entrance as a reminder of what had survived. Yetunde managed the vocational program. Her first sewing class included 12 women, 2 former prisoners, and a young man rejected from several jobs because of his record. Ireti trained volunteers to document land fraud and preserve evidence safely. Funmi organized lawyers willing to provide free consultations. Taiwo spent his days welcoming people others had dismissed. He understood their hesitation when they spoke to officials. He recognized the shame of being judged before being heard. He never promised that justice would arrive quickly, but he promised that no one who entered the center would stand alone. The neighborhood changed too. Iyakemi eventually apologized for calling him a murderer. Bamidele returned the money Taiwo had lent to him years earlier, though Taiwo used it to purchase school supplies for the center. Mama Bisola brought oranges every Friday and refused payment. Yetunde visited cautiously. Taiwo did not welcome him as if nothing had happened, but neither did he close the gate. Their healing came through small conversations, honest apologies, and long silences. Forgiveness did not erase betrayal. It simply prevented betrayal from controlling every future day. On the first anniversary of Taiwo's exoneration, the center held a modest celebration. Photographs of Morenike and Segun hung side by side in the entrance hall. Beneath them was a simple message. Their courage brought the truth home. After the guests left, Taiwo sat beneath the mango tree. Yetunde joined him, while Toby played nearby with a new toy car. Morenike would have loved this place, Yetunde said. She imagined something better than the life she was given. She brought us together. Taiwo nodded. Even after death, she made sure none of us remained alone. Toby ran toward them holding a school paper. "We have to write about our family," he said. "Mummy helped with her part, but I need yours." Taiwo smiled. "What do you want me to write?" Toby looked confused by the question. "Your name, Grandpa." The word entered Taiwo's heart more deeply than the judge's declaration of innocence. He looked at Yetunde. Tears shone in her eyes, but she was smiling. Taiwo took the pencil. For years he had believed home was a building waiting behind a gate. Then Femi tried to steal the building, prison, stole the years, and death stole the woman who had filled it with love. But home had returned in another form. It was Yetunde's trust, Toby's small hand, Morenike's courage, Segun's final truth, and a doorway kept open for wounded people. Taiwo wrote his name beneath the word, grandfather. Then he placed his arm around Toby and looked toward the rebuilt center glowing in the evening light. Prison had taken 10 years from him. It had not taken the rest of his life. Taiwo's story reminds us that justice may be delayed, hidden, or resisted, but truth does not lose its value simply because powerful people refuse to acknowledge it. 10 years were taken from him. No court decision, public apology, or financial compensation could return the days he lost with Morenike. Some wounds cannot be erased. Yet healing does not always mean recovering everything that was stolen. Sometimes healing means refusing to let the person who hurt us control the life we still have left. Taiwo could have allowed anger to consume him. Yetunde could have allowed fear to silence her. Iriti could have abandoned the truth after losing her career. Instead, each of them chose courage, even when courage came slowly and imperfectly. Their strength did not come from being fearless. It came from continuing despite their fear. This story also teaches us not to judge people only by their past, their poverty, or the accusations made against them. A prison uniform does not always identify a guilty person, just as wealth and social respect do not always reveal an honest one. Behind every public judgment is a human being carrying a story we may not understand. Most importantly, Taiwo discovered that home is more than walls, furniture, or legal documents. Home is where dignity is protected, where wounded people are welcomed, and where love gives someone a reason to begin again. The house he nearly lost became a place of hope for many others. His pain did not disappear, but it gained a purpose. Perhaps you are also carrying an injustice, a betrayal, or years you believe were wasted. Taiwo's journey offers a quiet reminder: what happened to you may shape your story, but it does not have to determine its ending. As long as life remains, there is still time to rebuild, forgive wisely, seek justice, and become a source of hope for someone else. What part of Taiwo's journey touched you most? Share your thoughts in the comments and tell us whether you believe you could forgive someone who stole so many years from your life. If this story inspired you, please like it, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories about courage, healing family, and justice.